That is
I
hilarious.
think we are. Yeah, now we are live. So we're here tonight, welcoming a guest. I'm here with Mr. Tiny Jr. In my top right-hand corner, and in the middle and below and center is Farzad Mesbahi, and Farzad has a can't even pronounce his name.
Come on,
He has a YouTube channel, and your YouTube channel is your name, correct?
Yes, that's right. Farzad Mesbahi.
A very creative title, I have to say.
Yeah, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it.
I could see. And Farzad has about going on 70,000 subscribers on YouTube. Wow. And on X, he has about 135,000 followers and growing. And, you know, this is early stages for Farzad. He's going to be huge. So I've enjoyed a relationship with him. I got to be on his community forum a while, and I got to really learn and appreciate what he offers. And I really respect the fact that he always searches for the truth. I do. And it's not like I agree with him on everything. We probably don't agree on a ton, but I really respect the fact that he's always trying to find the truth and let that guide him. And he's an expert in Tesla. And a little bit about his background, and please kick me if I state anything wrong.
Yes,
but
sir.
Born in Iran, moved to Spain.
Nope, you got it wrong already.
Okay. Look at that. I couldn't even go a second. I couldn't even go a second.
He can't even go get his bio.
His parents were born in Iran.
There we go.
Okay. Farzad was born in Spain and then moved to the United States, went to Penn State University, became an expert in logistics, worked at Tesla, was very successful investing at Tesla, then stopped working at Tesla, and then was looking for things to do, set up his channel, started it off kind of as a hobby, and now it's an ongoing business. And it's really something for you guys to go out there and take a look at. I really would suggest it, and I, again, respect the content. So Farzad's here tonight.
Let me inject a question. So, Farzad, what year did you graduate Penn State?
2009.
Oh, okay. I graduated in 2000 from Penn State. So.
Oh, really? That's awesome. We are.
That's right. That's awesome, we're alum. Man. See, I should be interviewing you now, not Richard.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Kick him out. Let's just talk about Penn State football, bro. The season's starting in 6 days.
That's crazy. Yeah, I'm actually about 3 hours south of Penn State main campus.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's awesome. So are you still in PA or you're outside of PA?
No,
Virginia?
I'm still in PA. Okay. Yeah, I've lived here all my life. So
that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
we lived in.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
That's
Can
okay.
I interrupt? I'm gonna interrupt. We lived in Bethlehem, so about 2.5 hours east, Lehigh Valley. Yeah, we were there. I was there for about 20 years.
Yeah, well, I had a buddy that went to Lehigh the first 2 years of college, so we'd go out there and hang out, party, whatnot.
Yeah,
wonderful.
He went to Carnegie Mellon on the other side of the state, so that's where we would go then too. So
that's awesome.
Just to interject, not legal advice. Don't rely upon anything that's said here. It's all nonsense. So just go in with that. And by the way, I was thinking about this as a concept. I always see the thumbnails where people are making funny faces.
Yeah.
I think in the video, you should start like the first frame of the video should be like that instead of the thumbnail. Make it live action. That's my view.
That's a great idea. I've actually seen that employed by a few people like randomly, and it's really cool. Like just like to nerd out on this because you go from seeing the thumbnail, like you said, and it's like you click on the video and then it's just like it's that image, and it feels the transition is so unique into the content. It's really, really cool. So you should start doing that. Come on.
All right.
You should capitalize on this.
I had a problem.
Don't make it too complicated for him.
I had a problem. I accidentally swallowed a fortune cookie whole. I believe the fortune said I was going to get indigestion.
Wow. 4 out of 10. Come on, Richard. My God. You can do better than that.
All right.
Where's your book?
Stupid jokes when we have guests. I just don't get it.
Here it goes. A ghost walks into a bar and asks for a specialty vodka drink. The bartender turns to him and says, "We don't serve spirits here."
6.5. That was better. That's like average-ish. You know,
All
that's okay. I would tell that joke if I was really drunk. Yeah.
Okay. Really all right. So I've never asked you this question. What's Brian is or Tiny JR, as most people call him. Actually, Mr. Tiny JR, as most people call him. I don't even know, what's your experience with lawyers yourself?
Really none. Like from a professional perspective, I do have one of my really good friends, Chris. His wife is a lawyer, and she's one of the smartest people I've ever met, Katie. And but that's really the only sort of context that I've interfaced with a lawyer. Is just like just asking them random questions. I've always been interested in the profession because it's like one of those professions that seem very difficult to sort of pass the tests and the knowledge that's required to be able to be an effective lawyer. To me, it seems like something that I would never be able to do because there's just so much you have to get familiar with. And it's such
You graduated from PSU with a degree in logistics, you could be a lawyer. A good lawyer, and Richard and I talk about this, a good lawyer knows how to write. Everything else is easy. If you're not a good writer, you're likely not a good lawyer. So
I see. But it's always like, it's been one of those, like I said, professions that are just so fascinating to me. But I find that, like so Richard, Mr. Tiny JR, right?
Nice.
Did I get that right?
Now he's got 37,000 followers that are going to call me Mr. Tiny JR. That's great.
All right, Brian. Katie, like I've met a few other lawyers just like in passing, like, what do you do for a living? I'm a lawyer. But I always found that they're very, they're all just very smart people is like the one commonality between them. So I don't know if Richard shares that trait, but at least
I was going to say
he plays it well.
I was going to say I didn't know JR shared that trait. So we think alike. We do think alike. Kind of what I was thinking. So Farzad gave me the opportunity to kind of talk about MMTLP in the community forums, and I would literally have MMTLP as my part of my name, amongst Bob and other various derivations of it. And one thing I liked about Farzad's channel is he preached civility, and it's a pretty, it has a lot of combustion. He's a Tesla person. Elon Musk is a controversial figure. You're going to get a lot of pushback, but he did preach that, and he was able to pull that across. So I was thinking about it. Basically we have this group, and I would talk about MMTLP weekly. I'd give like a 2-minute part. I don't know if you could absorb any of that, or if it sounded like the ramblings of a madman. But I tried to communicate that, and it was difficult. And we have a group, and the reason I was kind of thinking of you is there's a group, and they've been trying to get a resolution for 10 months. So there's a lot of pressure on the group, and there's a lot of pressure on group dynamics, and trying to keep civility amongst the group is really difficult. Yeah. And I kind of wanted to get your take on your thoughts about that, because I really respected kind of how you were somehow able to get people, even if they didn't agree, to be able to be okay with each other.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Let's add just one little tidbit there. To understand part of the group dynamics, there are people, Farzad, that have their life savings tied up in this. So tensions are high at least 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah, I mean I can't even imagine being in that situation, right? I mean, it's one of those things. Just learning from the story that Richard has told around MMTLP, it just sounds like such an injustice has been done. It seems like that needs to be resolved as soon as possible, because there's so many people hurting. From my perspective, I mean, maybe it's a skill. And again, I appreciate you sort of saying those kind things, and that means a lot coming from you. I really respect you, and you saying that, it means a lot. So I just want to start in saying that, because it's something that I definitely try to do in every group setting that I'm in. And I think it's something that I've learned just through my career. First when I was working at my gig before Tesla, but in Tesla specifically, it was just such an environment of high pressure, very existential feeling challenges that we were facing constantly. And the only way we were successful during those periods is by everybody just at the very least giving each other respect around the fact that we're all there to work on the same thing, right? So we always started with that sort of level set. And from my standpoint, the best way to do that is by be the person that you want other people to treat you like, right? Just be kind and ensure that you're treating everybody equally and ensure that you're giving everybody ample time to really talk about and describe and go through the process of verbalizing what they're going through or what they're trying to do. And I think that's a very important thing, you know? I think if, you know, and I don't know if you guys face this, but I really do feel like every single person, even if it's an opinion or something that I really, really disagree with, or I feel like it's very incomplete, if I don't allow those people to walk through that thought process on their own, I feel like it's not fair for me to assume that whatever that person might be thinking or saying is not valid. And so I always try and ensure that a forum exists where anybody and everybody can get all their thoughts out so that we can all talk about it. So at the very least, you get it off your chest, right? So that's something that I've always thought about in creating those sort of forums. But then I think that the more important thing is just ensuring that there's always kindness and respect, regardless of how heavy the emotional toll is about what you're talking about. Because in the end, every problem has a solution. It doesn't matter how insanely difficult it is. And that's another thing that I've learned. It doesn't matter how existential or absolutely insanely difficult it is. There is a solution somewhere. It's just, you got to ask the right questions. You got to talk through everything. And you just have to make sure you just go through you have to turn over every stone. And that requires conversation and it requires respect. And so without that, you can't problem solve, right? So that's, yeah.
How do you do? Because I've never, honestly, I've never seen you angry. So when you have like a I'm sure you do. You're a human being, so I assume you're not superhuman. Although JR said that before you came on, just to let you know. But when you have such a conviction in something and somebody is the polar opposite, how do you control your anger from not acting from a point of someone challenging your core beliefs?
It's a challenge. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm perfect. Like if I look at my, some of the posts I've made on Twitter in the past, there are situations where I have reacted in a way that I'm not happy about, because everybody's human. But it always starts from a baseline of I'm talking to another human being. So like I'll take Tesla Q as an example. So for your audience, Tesla Q is basically for this specific example, it's a subset of investors that are very much anti-Tesla stock price going up. And they want the stock to perform very poorly because they believe that there's something fundamentally wrong with the company. And a lot of times with my conversations from them is that it's related to Elon Musk being a fraudster or something along those lines. There's just some sort of fundamental thing that's going on with that group where they are very much against the company. But even then, even in those situations, they're still people. They're still people. And the thing that always goes through my mind is like, I bet you if I met any of those people randomly at a bar or at a street or something, I bet you I can talk to that person for 15, 20 minutes. Tesla will never come up as a topic and we would get along just fine. Just fine. And it goes around the theme of, and this is sort of becoming a little bit more, I think, evident in some of the sort of political candidates that are out there they're trying to push this rhetoric. But I do think there is value in this. We have so much more in common than we have different. And even if it's something that you or I or two people could be polar opposites on, we still share a lot of things. You know, we still all have eyes, we have brains, we have emotions. We go, you know, we've faced challenges in our childhood. We have traumas, we have things that we want that we don't have. We have pain, we have anger, right? These are all emotions that we all have shared in common as people. And I try to have that mindset every time I interface with somebody, so that even if they're saying something that I'm like, wow, that is the craziest stuff I've ever heard in my life. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, that doesn't, I try my best to be like, okay, but listen, maybe they experienced something in their life, or they're coming at it at an angle that for you, it's impossible to view through because you just have a different lens. So you just have to accept that that's their lens. That's the lens they're viewing it through. And as long as they're not being rude to me, okay, then that's just it. Let's just talk about the idea. Let's not talk about the individual. And as long as that's the case, it's very difficult for me to get, you know, it's difficult for me to get upset, but I'm not perfect. There are times, you know, if I'm hungry and tired and I've had a rough day, and somebody on Twitter, you know, replies to something I said, and, you know, there might be some truth to it, but I know it's like viewing it through the wrong lens and it's got like an aggressive tone to it, I might react poorly, you know. But those are the moments where I try to avoid as much as possible, because it's not helpful for discourse.
You know, I was thinking about that before today, and this is going to be a weird comparison, but you know, my family were Holocaust survivors, so they were in concentration camps, whatever. When they came, the ones who survived, they eventually made it to the United States. They kind of stayed very much together in a close proximity because they distrusted people. They developed a distrust of people. And even if you were an outsider with good intentions, they faced resistance, and they were subject to not being accepted. So I was kind of like equating that to like the MMTLP group. A lot of people, and it's kind of what you said, a lot of people that have suffered trauma. And I was thinking, unless you have some skin in the game, unless you're bought in, there is just a level of suspicion that I think is natural because of the trauma. And it makes it more difficult to keep a civility amongst the crowd. So, and I've been watching it. We've been like 10 months, and it is really an interesting study to see how groups stay together, how they form packs and leadership and things like that. But we obviously have been watching it very carefully, and it's still together, but it's difficult. It really is difficult. So anyway, that's why I was interested in like your approach, because that is an issue.
Yeah.
One thing I want, so everybody, we've tried like a myriad of ways of dealing with it. There is a team that's in Congress and dealing with Congress and making contacts with Congress. There's a media team. There's a bunch of lawsuits. But part of it, and obviously no pressure. I know that you're here on behalf of Elon Musk today, right? I believe you're his authorized agent. Is that true?
I'm not, and I never want that job.
Okay.
No thanks.
All right, maybe I was mistaken. What can I do? I was mistaken.
I like the guy.
By the way,
geez.
I forgot to mention it, because last week JR was, but this week I'm nude. But I'm using YouTube, not my choice. YouTube is using their eye to cover my clothing or cover me. So I don't know which one. I'm either in a tuxedo or in a blue shirt. I don't know which one. So
and a hat.
And a hat. Yeah, that comes with it too.
Wow.
Some silly looking hat.
This filter AI technology is next level, dude. It literally looks like you're wearing it.
It is incredible.
Amazing.
So people have asked, and we on Twitter, we go on Twitter and we send Elon tweets, and the history, or some of the history of Tesla is they were shorted to death, and the shorts tried to put him out of business basically, and because he was willing to sleep on the floor and basically invest everything personally, really his whole life, he survived. So we know that he's aware of that as an issue. And I think he would get so much positive response if he interjected himself into that dispute. And And we've tried, we've tried in the conventional ways. So you being someone who has, who's very thoughtful, if you were in our position and you wanted to get his attention, how would you go about getting his attention to get him involved in an issue that you thought was important? Because he's obviously interjected himself in other issues that he finds important.
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, the way you draw the parallels is what opened my eyes to the MMTLP thing that you were covering, right? There are parallels very much between what was the Tesla story back in, say, 2018, 2019, and what is the current MMTLP story. There is a lot of overlap there. And so I think, if I'm looking at it from a very just logistical way of how to make this happen, the guy's always on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, right? To me, crafting a post that is very descriptive of how the parallels exist and how his input would be extremely helpful, I think would be a very good starting point. And I'm more than happy to repost it on my channel. I mean, if that's one quick way of just getting the message out there, because he follows me, and then he can follow me, he can unfollow me. It's completely up to him. But I really appreciate that he follows me. But that would be one way of, at the very least, having some sort of thing that's in front of him that says, "Hey, this might be interesting," But I think crafting some sort of post that is that can draw the parallels in a very powerful way, and how this is not, this was a Tesla issue. This could continue to be a Tesla issue. Knowing that he does not think shorting should be legal. I'm pretty sure he's mentioned that before, where he thinks shorting is a practice that shouldn't even exist. I think he said that. He may have walked it back.
I think he did. I think he did.
So, we already know he has a predisposition to a mechanism that he doesn't, he thinks is wrong, right? He thinks it shouldn't work. And so I think it might be an interesting way to, at the very least, create awareness, because I think that's another thing that maybe the MMTLP community is facing, is that you guys are doing incredible work creating awareness around it, but it's still very much the niches of the niche. It's impacting a ton of people, and it really, really sucks. But I don't see it covered in national news. I don't see it covered anywhere. But you guys and everybody in the MMTLP community, you have a very unique position where, drawing parallels to the Tesla story, you are the experts. You will not be able to find experts around this anywhere else. And that's the beauty about the time that we live in now, is that the individual has a megaphone to be able to create awareness about things that nobody else is talking about. And so that would be my recommendation. Just investing a lot of time ensuring that there is a written video, whatever, that is tailored to create awareness. It's almost like a journalistic piece, and utilizing the parallels between Tesla and MMTLP and how that dynamic can exist in both. I think that's a very good way of creating awareness from a group that knows how much it sucks to be part of something that's similar, and then so that it's digestible by as many people as possible. That would be my recommendation.
Well, I'm glad I asked. That's a good answer. Thank you.
Sure.
So
you're a journalist. You guys are journalists. You are. You are.
Yeah. Some kind. Yeah.
It's not a very high bar nowadays.
I was going to say, no, you should call us media. We're in the media. Right.
I think what Richard and I are trying to become as educators in all of this, when it comes to MMTLP, right from day one, we've been in this. And, the one thing that Richard and I just had in common, obviously, was that we were lawyers. But we sensed very early on the misunderstanding that the community had as far back as the halt and just over some basic things. And we've always tried to keep an even keel about things and stay non-controversial. But it was interesting. And I wanted to inject a few questions on your answer towards kind of how you keep the community intact, because it's been one of the things that we've been struggling with this whole time, is how do you keep the community intact, educated on all the moving parts, and still try to move forward inch by inch and accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, which is some level of transparency and then resolution. So it's a convoluted story. And to your point, this organization was heavily shorted, but then they had government interjection on putting this thing, pausing this thing and putting a halt in place. And so it's trapped a lot of people. There's just a lot of good people, for right or wrong, that went all in on this. And, they're now living, the consequences are now affecting them 8, 9, and 10 months later. And, stress and tension is super high at this point.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean,
and before you start, I forgot to do this at the beginning. In your honor, I was going to spray a little cologne. So I just did.
Oh, wow. That was great.
A little Giorgio Gio.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I think I've had that one.
Have you?
Yeah.
Did you drink it or spray it?
I only sprayed it. I don't think I was drunk enough to try drinking it.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt the flow there, but
it's all good. No, it's a very, very important piece of information you added there for sure. It's really crucial. Yeah, I would say this is why difficult things are difficult. It's because it requires a level of patience and consistency that is very difficult to uphold when the challenges arise, right? I mean, that's everything that's worth doing will have moments of like, wow, is this even like, why is this so hard? Is it even worth it? Like, why this is
sure.
A pain in the ass. It's crazy, right? But keeping the consistency is very important, and just continuing to have open dialogue is extremely powerful. I mean, it's really that simple. Just open dialogue. Don't shy away from the difficult moments, and keep it respectful. That's it. I mean, literally can't do anything else. That's all it takes. And just ensure that every time those conversations are being had, everybody's in a mindset as best as everybody can be to have a honest, open discussion, and to try to be and just keep it that way and be respectful. It's hard. It's very hard to do. It's so, especially when it comes down to, again, like this is, I don't want to sound like an expert here because I am not in those shoes. I don't know what it feels like to be in that position where my life savings are trapped in something indefinitely, and I don't know where the end is, and I don't even know how it's going to end. That to me is a very terrifying proposition, but we have the tools, and luckily the community exists where, again, the group can come together and problem solve and talk about what's going on and figure out how to move forward. And just keep doing that. It will always take way longer than everybody would like. And that's another truth about these difficult things. It always takes 10 times longer than anybody would like, but there is an end to it at some point. I just don't know what it looks like and when it is,
Yeah. Part of the community, I'm sorry if you have, JR, I didn't mean to interrupt you if you had something else to say.
No, I'm good. I was
trying
to
part
click
of this
on the comments.
Yeah. Part of this problem is that the regulators have not been helpful,
Sure.
in providing, not just in providing remedies, but in providing simple information, and without concern for what the ramifications are. And they seem to work on a kind of an ad hoc basis in what they do, who they go after, what they scrutinize. And I'm going to use something that's going on right now. It's going right now. VinFast, right? That Vietnamese EV company. They've produced exactly -9 cars. Yeah. I'm exaggerating, of course.
100 billion market cap or something?
It's much more than that. It's like over 135 billion. Yeah. And it went from, I think, like 10 to about 70. Purely manipulation. So, everybody can see it. It's not like it's confusing. Crazy. The numbers don't make sense. It's obvious the numbers don't make sense. So obviously somebody's doing something, but the regulators don't step in. So that's really that really pisses off a lot of people.
Oh,
You know, because you don't know why they make those decisions.
It's impossible to trust a system where that happens, right? And I think that's the ultimate thing here. Like, if I were to draw a parallel to my experience back in 2018, 2017 as a Tesla investor, when we were going through those, or after the at the end of 2022, where it went from whatever 400 to 100, whatever it was. There are moments in time where it feels like the world isn't fair and you're getting screwed. Like, and there are probably people in positions of power that could fix it, but either choose to not fix it, or even worse yet, are part of the problem, right? So, but again, I go back to the fact that where we live in the age, like this day and age, and the three of us actively being part of this sort of media age, the awareness part of it can become extremely powerful, and it can start from the smallest of things. To actually get this to be taken a lot more seriously by more people, if the group feels that is one of the limiting factors from this thing actually getting somewhere and getting resolved, not just for this specific case, but for every case moving forward.
Yeah, so it's confusing. Part of, I think, the problem is that a lot of the people believe that it's endemic in the system, and
sure,
it's a problem that
I don't blame them.
Yeah, it's basically the Matrix, right? You don't, if you take the wrong pill, then you really see what's going on, and maybe you don't want to see what's going on. And
why not?
Well, because you don't want, because it's frightening.
Then you're sucked in. And Richard and I are the perfect example.
I mean,
is that what it takes, though? Is that what that's maybe what it takes?
But what happens? The concern is, so let's say you're invested in the stock market, and let's say the stock market is exposed to be not accurate, let's say, to be at best, and valuations and what's worth and whatever, it just doesn't exist. That would be a monumental impact on the United States, and a lot of people don't want it to change. There's all these kind of spokespeople in our community, and they refer to, it's basically the Goldman Sachs element. It's not just Goldman Sachs, but the kind of the big banking element, JP Morgan, those people, yeah. They have an interest in not changing the system, sure, because they're doing okay. So besides that, people in general, or a lot of people, are concerned about change, and when it's dramatic change, it's frightening.
Of course.
So people are concerned that if they really expose the system, that they can't tolerate it. So it's frightening. It's frightening. And, a lot of people believe that really it's the system is on stilts, and,
sure,
and the amount of money that's required to resolve it is an astronomical sum. And it's not just limited to the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah. It would be silly to assume, and this is sort of a conclusion that I've come to recently, it would be silly to assume that anything made by humans works well. Honestly, because humans are naturally imperfect. We are people, we are a species, as impressive as we are versus every other living organism that we've ever discovered, we're dumb. We can be very dumb. And sometimes we're so dumb that we are willing to let things exist instead of doing the right thing because it hurts. And then once you let that go on for years and years and years, you move away from individuals being the ones responsible for it being wrong to the thing just becoming its own monster. That is just, it's not really an individual, but it's the result of a collection of humans not doing the right thing for a really long time. And I think a lot of systems, this is just personal opinion, I think a lot of systems in the world are like this, especially, in places where power is important and can be extremely influential, like the United States. Now, I don't, and I'm trying to separate this away from, I think we have a number of individuals that are actively pulling the strings on everything that happens. I think humans are too incompetent for that, in my opinion. I think humans are not very well equipped to do that for a really long time. But we could have systems that, if we just ignore what's happening, that they will be very painful and hurt a lot. However, that doesn't mean that because it's something that's very scary and could potentially undo that system. As you see balloons moving on.
I like it. I like
That's
it.
producer
Nice.
wife.
I like it. Say hello to CM for me. Say hello
Will
to CM.
do. Richard says hi. FYI. I don't know if you heard her. She said hi.
Yes.
But I oftentimes feel like if something is extremely scary, it's a signal that you're going down the right path, because there's something there. There's something there that needs to be resolved. There's something there that needs to be changed so that it's no longer scary. And it usually, to overcome those situations, it requires a number of people that are willing to come together that say, okay, we're ride or die. Ride or die, and it's funny because I experienced that at Tesla when we were working there. It's sort of analogous to my experience there, but I really do think it applies to everything. It applies to everything. That's why when you were talking about the MMTLP story, it resonated with me so deeply, because I'm like, man, there's so many, like, you're right, there's a lot of parallels between this and a lot of stories, but the scary part, I think, should be taken as a signal that it's the steps that need to be taken, at the very least, to just see where it goes, like see where it goes,
You're gonna, and boy, this is so perfect. I've been wanting to talk with JR about this topic for about the past 6 weeks, and I get to raise it. And you were talking about difficulties, the impact on society, and sometimes things are really tough, right?
Yeah.
And it's tough to change. So
Yes.
Almost as a comical topic, but now it's perfect. Robots, right? So
Yeah.
Tesla's in the robot field, right? And there's
Mhm.
other companies, Boston Dynamics, which I think is owned by Honda or Hyundai.
Yeah.
And there's other companies in other countries. And it doesn't appear that functional robots that can really do tasks are that far off, to be functional. I don't know.
Feel that way.
Yeah, I don't know cost wise, but I don't think it's really that far off.
Yeah.
And the technology certainly seems simpler than like FSD, full self-driving, that Tesla is doing.
In some ways, yeah.
Yeah, we've referenced this before, but it's not that far off. And we talked about it's going to have a gargantuan impact on society and culture. And I kind of wanted to get your take on that.
On the
the
impact of robotics.
Yeah,
And stuff.
On the world and the country, and kind of just how we're going to function.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be one of those things where it's going to take a lot of people by surprise. I firmly believe that. I think you've already kind of seen this in parts of the U.S. There is and back in 2020, there was a Democratic presidential candidate called Andrew Yang. I don't know how familiar you guys are with him, but one of the things that drew me to his some of the things he was talking about was how the shift towards automation and robotics and software is really responsible for a lot of the pain that people feel in a lot of the cities in the United States that have sort of become barren or filled with despair. Like Detroit is the perfect example. Detroit went from this incredible city that was the example of what America could be to probably one of the worst, no disrespect to anybody from Detroit, but it's not what it used to be. Let's just say that, right? It's definitely not what it used to be. You can feel it. And I'm not saying that that's true for all parts of Detroit, but it's not this sort of example of what the best of America looks like. And the reason why this gentleman sort of put forward, which I think I deeply believe this, and you use as an example for many other parts of the country where manufacturing was a big deal, kind of like in Detroit with the big three, is that we've moved away from people actively doing work more and more towards automated systems that do that work. And so what's an example that is everybody feels every day, but maybe they don't think of it that way? Amazon. So what is Amazon? Amazon is a software company that has figured out how to remove people that are associated with a storefront, right? Like a mom and pop shop, a Walmart, whatever, physical space where people would stock the shelves, people would unload the trucks, people would move product from point A to point B, to taking all these products and then very efficiently moving them to these giant warehouses, right? And then in those giant warehouses, it's not individuals that pick the product, it's robots and it's software. If you go to any Amazon warehouse nowadays, the only reason why they can get stuff to you same day and next day is not because they have a million people employed, it's because they have automated systems that allow those million people to do the work of 100 million people. And that has been impacting the country for a really long time. Now with robotics and things like full self-driving and AI, that's going to be taken to a whole different level, because now you're going to start impacting jobs like driving. Like driving is going to become automated. So what does that mean? The largest industry in the United States is truck driver. 3 million jobs or something, 5 million jobs. It's the biggest. I forget what the exact number is, but there's a lot of truck drivers out there. What happens the minute a self-driving semi, which Tesla is working on as an example, becomes viable enough to where you don't need a driver anymore and you just use a self-driving truck to haul product from point A to point B? You automatically create an incentive for every company that has access to that truck to move away from a human driver and instead purchase a self-driving truck, because the biggest piece of the cost equation for a semi-truck is the driver. It's not the gas, it's not the repair, it's the driver. That is where the majority of the cost goes. And so what happens when 3 million drivers go out of work? You know, you look around and you're like, okay, there seem to be less and less jobs, traditional jobs, let's call them, where somebody that has a certain skill set can jump from one place to another. And this has been happening for a really long time, I think, and it's going to continue to accelerate. And what that's going to cause, it's going to create an environment where I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to get disrupted really quickly out of jobs like driving and things like that. And there won't be enough jobs available in the economy for those people to be like, oh, wow, I just lost my driver's job. I'm going to become X number of, I'm going to do this. I mean, just look at the openings in the United States, 10 million open jobs or something like that, but nobody's doing them. Why? Because they don't pay enough and they suck, right? And that's not a good enough excuse to keep an economy open. What that really means is that these companies haven't figured out yet how to automate those jobs. And that is the troubling sign for this automation thing. I just went on a rant. I don't even know if I answered your question, dude. I'm sorry.
You may have at some point. Minutes 2:13 through 3:05, I believe. Fantastic. You did. I was thinking, but the people those truckers, for example, that lose their jobs, they're not going to be too happy, and unless they're trained in new positions or there are new jobs, there's going to be issues.
Yes.
And again, I think, unfortunately, in this country and maybe other places, we don't really act proactively. We usually respond.
Yes.
And we may be that, the problem arises and there's chaos, and that's when we start to react to it, as opposed to thinking
that's
about
exactly the outcome.
Yeah, because to me, it seems like it's going to create social disorder, just because you have to figure out what, different things for people to do. You have to figure out the economics, how that's going to play in. And I know Tesla, for example, part of the machinery that makes the cars are robots. So it's just a continuation of a process in robotics, just becoming more of the, the Terminator type. It kind of looks like that, more of that image. But again, I'm really concerned about the reaction amongst the society. And for me, it's probably going to impact me very little in my lifetime, but for my kids and my grandkids, it's going to be really impactful.
Yes, for sure. I mean, and I will give you the flip side. The flip side of this is that I think people will also benefit from this transformation, because what is it doing? These technologies are becoming more and more available to the individual. Like, for example, I'll use myself as a perfect example. What I do now between X and YouTube, it's generating such a significant income that it's literally a replacement for most of the jobs I've had in my career. Like, it's by far, and I get to do it on my own schedule, and it's something that I control 100% of the time. What has enabled me to do that? The internet and computers and cameras that I can afford. That didn't exist 100 years ago. And that is a result of progress. That's a result of automation. That's a result of technology. That's a result of software. And so there is a flip side to the story where, as much disruption as you're going to have, which I believe is going to be, it's going to suck. I really do feel like it's going to suck for a lot of people. On the flip side, you also now have opportunities for people to step into professions, roles, entrepreneurial activities that potentially more closely align to their natural abilities versus just having a job just to have a job. And so that's the flip side of this. But my worry is that change is happening so quickly that people will not be able to adjust in a realistic time frame. Like, I think what's going to happen is 3 million drivers, and then in 5 years it's going to be no drivers, and then like 5 years ain't enough time for the economy to figure out how to properly ensure that those 3 million people that get displaced don't end up in a really terrible situation. And you align that with every other sector that's getting disrupted, like ChatGPT, as an example. For how long was being a coder the number one job that we were telling kids to have in college? You have to go to school and learn programming. ChatGPT came out. You can have one programmer do the job of 100 programmers. So at that point, 99 programmers, like, we've told all these people to become coders and programmers. I'm seeing this in the tech sector right now, and especially in this area. There are so few jobs open right now for people in the traditional tech sector, and there are so many. There's like 250 applicants for every open job in that sector. Why? Because those professions have been disrupted because of AI and technology. And so you apply this to every single sector up and down the economy in a very quick manner. I don't know. There will be disruption, but there's a silver lining there. With everything.
It may. I'm not even making a determination about a prospective conclusion. I'm just saying that, like everything else, we kind of just roll into it. We'll kind of roll into it, then we'll have to deal with the consequences, and it's messy. It'll be messy, even if
like
good.
Always. Yeah. It's always messy. You're 100% right. It's always messy, and it's always very difficult to navigate through, but we've done it before.
JR, so I've asked you this like 6 times. So do you have any opinion?
Well, I was just going to say, and Farzad, I'm going to play devil's advocate, and it's not that I don't agree with the technology being able to, and let's use the self-driving truck as an example, but when I think you basically tied together what you were saying with ChatGPT, and we told all these young kids to be coders. But I think there's a significant difference between, self-driving cars and eliminating truck drivers and eliminating a certain subset of coders. And the thing that came to mind as soon as you started talking about that was, you've got this powerful lobbyist group out there that represents the truck driving industry. And I think you're right with the technology moving in that direction. 3 to 5 years. Yeah. The truck could be there to deliver the merchandise and everything's safe and everything's great. But I think that human factor is going to push that out maybe 5 to 10 to 15 years before it would totally wipe out the industry and eliminate all these jobs. I would just be hard pressed to think that truck drivers, and the reason this popped into my head is because I deal with unions, so I know how they function. I would just be hard pressed to think that it would happen that quick. I don't think that I do agree with you. At some point, that's where things are moving, and that's going to take over that certain subsection of the economy. I just think 3 to 5 years out would be a little ambitious. That's all. But I think you're right. And they'll stop the truck driving schools will go by the wayside. You'll start to see less people coming in. But I think we're a bit off from that level of wiping out those types of jobs.
I definitely respect that viewpoint, and I think I agree with the fact that there will be bodies like unions and lobbyist groups that will definitely delay a lot of this transitional sort of things that's going on. That's going to ease the pain. But on the flip side, I do think there are incentives in place, especially in a capitalistic environment, for a player that's not tied to those bodies to disrupt that sector. So like if I use the Tesla as an example, right? Like Tesla's competition, which, you know, some people make an argument that they don't have competition, but let's just say they have competition. Ford, GM, Toyota, blah, blah, blah. But let's use Ford, GM, and Stellantis in the US. All these three groups are unionized. Their factory workers are unionized through the UAW. What's happening with those three companies though? As the gas car business is sort of staying flat to declining, especially compared to a few years ago, their EV business is going nowhere. And why is that? It's because now you have a fourth player in the United States called Tesla that is not unionized, that is building EVs that people want. And as the economy transitions away from gas cars into electric vehicles, those three players that are unionized are going to be heavily disrupted by a company that builds cars that's not unionized. And so I think that type of environment could accelerate. Like it might not be 3 years, it might not be 5 years, but it won't be 10 or 20 years either, right? Yeah. Does that make sense?
I agree. I think it's coming. I just, you know, when I look at the people side of things and dealing with these unions and dealing with the people side, I mean, there's a whole other subset of this population that, and I struggle with it. What the hell is a self-driving car? What do you mean? There's a car out there on the road that can drive around and is safe? You know, that's hard for me to get my head wrapped around that. So,
yeah, no, I definitely, I agree with you. I think there will be resistance, both at an individual level and from a systematic perspective that will delay some of these 100%. But I do think that we have to keep in mind that the economic incentive to move towards that new technology is going to be so vast. It's a giant disruption to the cost of transportation. If you can lower your logistics costs, which for a company like Amazon is a giant percentage of the cost by say 90%, because you're removing the driver out of the equation and you're converting your truck from diesel to electric, which will be way cheaper to operate, and it's never going to get into accidents, it's never going to break down. Then all of a sudden you have, you know, it's like it becomes this age-old battle between the capitalists, you know, the people in power, and the people, you know, and it's going to be wild to see. It's history repeats itself, it seems like, eh?
By the way, one of the reasons I got into it's because somebody just posted a comment. One of the reasons I got into MMTLP was because I was into Tesla and was invested in Tesla, and I started looking at battery issues, and MMAT designs materials to prevent battery fires. So that's why I got interested in MMAT, which got me to MMTLP. So it was really Tesla that brought me to MMAT and MMTLP, in answer to the question somebody asked. So anyway, I appreciate your response. I wanted to address one thing really quick. This is kind of off the topic. Two things. First of all, the first time I got a universal remote, I thought to myself, this changes everything.
Welcome to the world.
That was good. Yeah. That was an 8. That was a solid 8.
So there was somebody posted in the last couple of days. One of our issues is trying to get the stock totals. So there's a statute in New York that lets you apply before any lawsuits filed to get certain information. So somebody posted a thought about a particular case that suggested that the information was provided. And this means that FINRA was basically providing information so you could figure out what went on. Mm-hmm. And to this point in time, MMTLP, they've refused to it. So we've kind of looked at it, and it's the same statute that Mark Brazil used. In this case, the judge did not approve the petition either. Just for whatever reason, FINRA elected to voluntarily comply with the subpoena. Right. Now, the one difference, and this is kind of what I'm going to throw out. So anybody who's practicing in a state that permits this type of discovery, kind of what looked like to me that was the difference besides everything else, and maybe why FINRA elected to do what they did, was because it didn't look like to me they were going after the broker information. It looked like to me they were going after the market maker information, and also the information relating to those that might have illegally shorted the stock, which is one step below the broker. and maybe FINRA, because they weren't the target, maybe they thought they were able to disclose it. But ultimately, even though they disclosed it subject to a confidentiality agreement, whereby it can only be used in that proceeding and not outside that proceeding. So it had some value, the agreement, but not really. The conclusion that it was successful legally is probably premature, and it's the use of the information was helpful, but I don't know if it necessarily applies. I understand why somebody would use that for maybe filing an appeal, but it would have been more usable if the court would have said, yes, the petition is granted. That would have been a better outcome. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, JR?
Well, again, the one thing that I questioned was because it was released under a confidential, or because FINRA voluntarily provided the information, you don't really know what information they provided. I mean, we just know that they agreed to something and didn't disclose it. The one comment that I had made to an individual that had called me, in fact, weeks ago about this, I lost my train of thought. I think what this does for Mark is it puts some holes in FINRA's argument, and the holes were the big ones that we talked about, that it's a burden to get the information, that many of the people, there's no one there that would be able to read the information anyways, and it would take us months to disseminate it so that you could understand it. I mean, those arguments go out the door. They voluntarily released this information to another corporation, and so those arguments hold zero weight. So I think that's where it's beneficial for Mark. But in terms of, it's setting precedent or anything like that, to your point, the judge didn't sign it. They agreed to turn the information over.
Okay. If you notice that Farzad is hiding somewhere, I don't know where he disappeared.
He's like, dude, they're talking law. I'm out of here.
Yeah, he did. He probably just said he had enough. And, it's kind of like me at a wedding. At some point in time,
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. I was going to say that's me. That's kind of me at a wedding. At some point in time, I just disappear.
Some point,
that's the way it goes.
Yeah, that's
the way it goes.
I had an overhydration problem, and then y'all were getting into something real technical. I'm like, oh, this might be the perfect time.
I told you. He's like, dude,
he did say it. He basically said it. He said it was such a boring part that it was time to go.
Not boring at all. Just not in my wheelhouse, and I couldn't think because my bladder was about to explode.
All right. One thing I wanted to briefly talk about was I did a video about various options. So if you're in a security situation, basically it could apply to a lot of different situations. I did a video and nobody could hear me, by the way, on the video. So I'm going to quickly do it. It was pretty funny. So I kind of talked about what MMTLP people could do. They could do nothing. They could just kind of let things play out. They could transfer their shares. There's a transfer agent. So they could transfer to a transfer agent, which they could. Go to Congress and make calls on Congress, which has happened. They could go to the media and make calls on the media, which has also happened. They could go to their own lawyer and they could file some action involving various defendants like we spoke about earlier. But if you're like a single guy who has stock and hires a lawyer, you're also going to spend a bunch of money. So that's why that's negative. But if you had a lot of stock, I would consider it myself. You have an opportunity to go to arbitration. So there's a securities arbitration system that's set up. I'm in arbitration with Fidelity regarding MMTLP. Not easy for most people, but if you can find somebody to handle it on a contingency fee so you don't have to pay, that might be a good solution. And one of the thoughts was if you barraged the system with arbitration claims, it might make change because it would be difficult for people to handle it. And then and I'm doing, by the way, in descending order, there might be multiple things that are going on at the same time. You could have multiple things going on. Last but not least, in my opinion, just my opinion, are class actions. Now, class actions are great because you don't have to pay any money, but it takes a long time and the recoveries are low. If it's your best choice, it's kind of like all those decisions. If it's your best choice, then so be it. It's your best choice. But it certainly wouldn't be my first choice, and it wasn't my election, my first choice. But for some people, they might believe it. It might be for them. but you have time usually because you have to get notice. So what happens is a class action's filed, it has to get to a certain state, and then potential members basically get a postcard in the mail, and they have an election whether they want to go in or go out. So I don't think there's a great fear that they're going to miss the boat. The only advantage of being like the person. So there's a person in a class action who's actually the person. The benefit of that is they usually get some additional compensation for being in that position. But it's not like they're going to get an extra $1 million. They might get an extra $5,000. So it's not like so significant. So taking that from that, I was thinking to myself, what if somebody's going out and they're going to hire a lawyer? What kind of questions would you ask? Because maybe most people so I was thinking, what would I ask as a lawyer if I went to a lawyer and wanted to find out if the person was capable of handling my matter? So part of it, one, if I have a real estate matter, then I probably want to go to a real estate attorney, because you want to have the person that's familiar with the subject matter. And if it's securities, you want to be securities. And that's not meaning that somebody who's not a specialist, because, for example, JR and I know nothing about securities law, but we talk about it all the time. But we say we know nothing about securities law. So sometimes we happen to stumble into the right answer, but generally not. Okay. So
speak for yourself, man.
Okay. All right. That's right. JR never stumbles into the right answer. He's always off. He's always off. So that's one. I'd make sure the person had a kind of a experience in the subject matter you wanted. Then I would find out what their expectations were. What do they think they can do? And I would balance that with what your goals and expectations are. And I would see if there was a match. Because maybe what you think you can get and what your lawyer is telling you that he's expecting to get are not the same things. Then I would ask, and this may not be the first time, but it may be on a subsequent meeting, I would ask the lawyer to give me the strengths and weaknesses of my case. And he will have both. And if he doesn't have both, I walk. And by the way, at any point in time, if I get a feeling of and this, by the way, applies to any professional, I don't care if it's a doctor, lawyer, whatever. If I get that feeling in the gut of my stomach, there's something that I'm uncomfortable with, I walk. I may not know, but I trust my gut when it comes to that. And I think people oftentimes know the answer, but they don't necessarily trust themselves, but they should. So on top of that, and by the way, if any lawyer guarantees you something, then I walk on that too, because that's an absolute no-no. It's a skilled lawyer would not. They would always hedge their bets. I would also ask about costs. How much is it going to cost? What the legal fees are going to be. And if it's going to be a sizable engagement, I would ask them to prepare me a budget and kind of give me a breakdown of hours and what section is going to happen. And last but not least, I would ask them for what they thought was the most likely outcome. And so I'm asking a bunch of questions. A lot of times, unfortunately, and it happens when I go to a doctor, for example, a lot of times people get intimidated when they're going to somebody who specializes in anything. And I urge people really here that if you're going to a lawyer or whatever, and it's meaningful to you, that you should take the time to ask those questions. And if I'm saying from my perspective, if somebody asks me those questions, I take no offense. I expect it, and I'm perfectly fine. So you shouldn't be bad. You shouldn't feel bad directing. Okay, that was my 20-minute video in like 4 minutes, probably.
So do I have to send you do I have to pay you now?
Yes, you do.
Is this okay?
I sent you the bill before we started. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, and was it in the email? Oh,
it wasn't.
I think it's in my spam where it belongs.
Okay. One thing I really wanted to ask you about that I've never gotten a good answer about, and I'm kind of pissed off to be about on it, honestly, is if I'm planning on going on vacation to Spain next year. One, I know I got to get a visa, by the way. You got to get a visa now. Yeah. If you go to Spain, Italy, Germany.
We think about that.
Yeah, it sucks. I think that sucks. So if you're going to take a trip, you got some experience in Spain. If you were going to do a vacation in Spain, where would you go?
Well, I mean, So when I left Spain, I was 12. So I was raised in Spain. I was born in Spain, and I haven't been back since I was 12. So like from my standpoint,
Do you
what
hate
I tell you,
Spain? Do you hate
no, I don't
Spain?
hate Spain. I just haven't been back since.
Okay.
He left
It's
in
yeah, but
I
2012.
I'll
think
be
you
back.
hate Spain. That's my
No, not
opinion.
at
That's
all.
my
Not at
opinion.
all.
Whatever.
So the places that I want to go, I mean, you have your standard ones. You have Barcelona, you have Madrid, you have you have the northwest of the country, which is absolutely gorgeous. Uh, I think Spain. What's unique about Spain is that it's like it's very reminiscent to me from what I recall of California. It looks a lot like California, and the climate's very similar as well. It's dry. It's always nice and warm. Um, and there's a lot of beautiful spots on the Mediterranean that you can go to really enjoy beach life. So places like Malaga and other places as well. Actually, is Malaga on the east or west? I forget. There was two cities in the south of Spain that I always get a freaking reverse. But really anywhere on the Mediterranean coast is incredible. But a must see from everybody that I've talked to that has been there. My parents have visited different cities in Spain as well. I mean, Barcelona is you have to go to Barcelona. You have to go to Barcelona. But the southern part of the country is also beautiful. Andalusia, which is like the southern part. It's like the southern state or whatever you want to call it, the province. That's where Cordoba, Malaga, Sevilla. That's where all those places are at. So that's a beautiful spot too. And
Where's
then
the wine area?
the wine area, it's sort of in the middle of the country. It's quite vast. I mean, it's really the entire country is a wine area, but it's going to be
By the
more
way,
towards
just
the
so you know,
south.
I should have said at the beginning that dogs prefer these videos more than people do. So we encourage dogs to watch. So I thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah. Peony is very excited about the wine talk. Um, I believe it's more like the southern half of Spain that's really good in wine. But again, I haven't been back since I was 12, so I'm not a Spain expert, even though I can speak Spanish. But yeah.
Okay. One thing that we've talked about, and we talked about with Will Stewart a little bit, was commercial real estate. So, I was proposing that Tesla, I think they're listening to me, by the way, but I proposed that Tesla would buy a lot of the failing commercial properties because you get a good deal on it and you could do things with it. So one
They did
thing
that
they
with
did,
Fremont in California.
yeah, they did. It was like GM, and I think it was Toyota. That was a GM, and I think Toyota
Yeah.
plants at one point in time. So I'm going to get to the thing that's I think is really interesting, but they bought a huge movie theater complex in Chatsworth, California, and they're converting that to a service center and a delivery center. And I wouldn't be surprised because it's a big piece of property, and they may do something else there. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't do something else on there. But I think there's going to be a lot of those opportunities that are available whereby, because people are concerned about the distressed commercial property in the United States. They're concerned about what the impact is going to be on the economy. Are there going to be foreclosures, et cetera? And, I've always thought that this is an avenue, like switching over to EV related centers where you have entertainment, charging, car related things. But I saw recently that Tesla is doing or got approved for doing a diner and a recharging place and a movie place in LA.
Yeah.
In LA, it's 24-hour place. It just started the grading, and I thought it's a fantastic idea. As a kind of a new entertainment locale. I don't know if you saw that or not.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks
What's
awesome.
your view on that?
I think it's a brilliant play by them. I think one thing that Tesla is extremely good at is they know how to they know how to capitalize on opportunities that are before them, especially when it comes to snatching up properties that they pennies on the dollar. I mean, Fremont is a freaking perfect example of that. I mean, what a genius move.
So Fremont is just for clarity, Fremont's the first Tesla factory in Fremont, California.
Their first factory that allowed them to go into a mass market. So they had a smaller factory before that, but Fremont was the one that allowed them to go 500,000 units per year. Was Fremont in conjunction with China, but it's mostly Fremont. I think it's I really encourage them to do that, and I can't tell you. So now I'm actually open. I can actually talk about a lot of these things now because my 2 years coming up on my NDA. Well, I was working at Tesla, so that's I
Yeah,
can talk
so
about
he
some of
has.
the,
We talk about
yeah,
that in our terms. So
yeah,
people can't talk about things. So Tesla employees get a non-disclosure agreement, and they cannot talk about certain topics. And if they do, they will probably face ramifications and have to hire a lawyer. That's probably
yes.
yeah.
So I figured I can say it here because I have 2 lawyers with me, so y'all can be like, "Shut up!" No, but
JR said he'll do it for free.
okay, great.
Yeah, okay.
I doubt it. But no, this is going to be very benign. But one of the things, when I was working at the company, I was part of the group that was in charge of ensuring that the distribution network in the United States, especially, but we were also working in parts of Europe and for a little bit in China for a hot second, but it was mostly the US and parts of Europe, was to ensure that the parts distribution network, so basically the warehouses that house all the parts that service centers and body shops use to repair Teslas and to fix Teslas and to to service Teslas, to grow it in tandem with Tesla going from 100,000 cars per year to 500 a million plus per year. So we have to 10x our distribution network capabilities, not necessarily 10x our warehouses, but 10x our capabilities. It's one way of thinking about it. And the one thing that I was always like talking about with the leadership groups was why aren't we buying up warehouses that we can turn into service centers and body shops? I don't understand that. Because you think about, Elon's always talking about, I want to get the cars to be able to be repairable F1 style. You get them into the shop, and then within a few seconds, in an ideal scenario, which is basically impossible, but as quickly as possible, you drive into the shop and then you bounce, because I want service to be just immediate. So what's the only way you can do that? You have to have the parts there. You can't have the parts there if you don't have a big enough footprint to house the parts. And as you can get super smart about what parts you can keep in what locations. Like the fast movers. Like you're always going to be changing freaking sensors for the wheels, the pressure sensors for the wheels. You're always going to be changing rims. You're always going to be changing tires. You're always going to be changing fascias, front and rears at body shops. When people get into an accident, what's the first thing that you impact? The front bumper or the rear bumper? Those are fascias. You always want to have bumpers in there. You always want to have glass. So you can get really smart about that. But at some point, you're going to reach a situation where the permutation of things that could potentially go wrong will mean that a piece is missing, probably, let's say, 20 to 30% of the time. And so 20 to 30% of the time when somebody pulls in, they will not be able to get their service completed because they're going to have to wait for the part to arrive to that location. So what is one way that you completely get rid of that variable? You make the facility big enough so you can house every part imaginable you could need up to the 98th percentile, right? Like 98% of use cases, 99% of use cases. And so them getting into, like, this is a perfect opportunity for them to capitalize on this, is to find 100,000 square foot facilities that will be in distress because of as commercial real estate, or even 50,000 square foot facility. It doesn't have to be this giant place. It just has to be a lot bigger than what they have now, to make it into a mini warehouse and then just double it as a service center. And so that way, people literally, when they want to have service, they just drive into the shop, they get it done within minutes, and then you drive out. And then from that perspective, you're able to offer, bar none, the greatest service experience out of any automaker out there. And this is a perfect time for them to do something like that. But it could go into so much more. It could go into so much more than that example. But I love. It sucks that we're in a situation where that a lot of that's going to come to a head with the commercial real estate, but it's a perfect time for them to capitalize on it and take their business to the next level. And that's one way they can do that.
And there'll probably be other companies that decide to take advantage also. But I think there will be people to fill in with new ideas and new concepts for either shopping, entertainment, whatever. I think it's just kind of. So I got one more topic for you, and I'm gonna throw out one more that's kind of going back to the MMTLP vibe. So just to bring everybody up to speed, this is Alpine, so GTII. So there's another, and this probably is helpful because people sometimes complain that I kind of jump to the end. So GTII is some company. It has also the problem with all these short shares. There are some companies that enable the shorting to occur. The FINRA and the SEC obviously supervise these companies. One particular company has been in business since 1984. It got disciplined 40 separate times up through 2022. Disciplined by like not proper supervision, not proper accounting, not proper reporting. 40
How's that
different,
business still in business?
yeah, it somehow it managed. And then in 2022, finally there was an order that was obtained, and they were kicked out. But it didn't happen. That didn't happen immediately either. Then there was an appeal, went up on appeal, so that's kind of sitting on appeal. But what's amazing, and FINRA has not acted to get rid of them, despite all this. On top of that, during this period of time, so between 2015, 2020, 2022, while this company has been sanctioned and then it gets an order to get kicked out, they had a convicted sex offender who was working for them that they tried to get in a representative position, literally to be a representative of the company. And this is not like 2015. This is like closer to 2022. And FINRA has not acted. And the ultimate issue comes down to is FINRA and the SEC are trying to protect their authority as agencies as opposed to trying to protect the public from the misconduct. And it's concerning. Yeah. So it's ongoing now. There's an appeal going. There's going to be briefs filed. The U.S. Supreme Court and the courts seemingly are going to start to try to limit the authority of agencies, of federal agencies, and kind of deliver, at least it appears, and deliver more power back to the executive branch. That's kind of seems how it goes. So, and as long as that the regulators are replaced with competent people to regulate, then it's fine. If there's no one to replace that gap, then even though it's seemingly a nice outcome, in the end, it's not.
Yeah.
You know, like that. So,
sure.
So anyway, that's a big deal also amongst the this community. That particular thing is also a big deal because it's also most of these cases, unfortunately, they're not like it's a, just a fine line that something's over. It's blatant. And it's in people's faces, and that's why it's so offensive.
Yeah, painful.
Notwithstanding the fact the actual impact to people's lives. So I wanted to throw that out because there's some people that are interested in that. We're following that also, and we will continue that. The last thing I wanted to
can I just say something? Yeah.
Sure.
What I love about this channel is that you guys have. It seems like you're able to identify things that are obviously messed up that are getting no attention. Is that a fair way of categorizing sort of what you guys do?
Because Richard and I have been talking about this GTII legal issue for what, 4, 5, 6 weeks now, maybe even more than that. I don't know. And what was it? Politico picked up on the article. I don't know if they picked it. We think they picked it up from us because they basically said the exact same thing we've been saying. But it's gaining a little attention, and it's gaining attention because the level of appellate court it's at now. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But yeah, these are the things we talk about and try to bring attention to.
And my goal, probably like 5 years ago, I thought about it. I don't want to be a lawyer my entire life. I've done it long enough. It's interesting. It's not boring. It creates interesting situations. If you can help people, it's great. But it also at some point in time, as so. But
ready for the next thing.
I thought I would love to go out and kind of simplify things for people that were not lawyers and make it easier for them. So when they went out and they hired a lawyer or they were trying to review something, that it would be easier for them. And I didn't know how to get to that spot. So I really
You're there now.
I really thank you. Honestly, I thank you. because I wouldn't have done it ordinarily. I was exposed to it, so it gave me an opportunity. It was something I was looking for, and it gave me an opportunity. So I thank you for that. That's one of the reasons I invited you for this, because I wanted to thank you for that.
Dude, that's awesome. Thank you very much for saying that. But I mean, isn't it just incredible just how you can stumble upon things without even knowing you're in them?
Yeah.
Like before you know it, you're like, oh shit, I've picked up this skill set that I never knew I could use for this thing, you know? And now you guys are doing that, and you're doing that. And I think I love that idea, and I strongly encourage you to do that. Because that is a giant value add to society.
You know, what's interesting is I find like the community, because you find it, they know bullshit too. So they know as a group, you know, it's a collective.
People are way smarter than people give credit for.
They are.
Yeah.
We've tried, you know, we try to, same thing as you. We try not to give them bullshit. We may not give them what they want exactly, but we try to give them, and it has turned out, we both kind of learned this, and others may not have learned it as well. But when people are traumatized, you have to approach them in a gentle manner. Yeah. And you really have to be, it's got to be, you know, not just the issue, you know, whatever the issue is, that's important, but understanding how they feel emotionally and how you have to take that in consideration, how you speak. It's really important. That's something that I think we've both learned.
The humanity part of it is super important.
I don't think it's that we learned it, Richard. I think that we recognized very early on in all of this that we need one of the skill sets that we utilize is we need to be empathetic. You know, we to your point, we might not say what they all like or want to hear, but we say it, but we say it in a way that's empathetic. And I think sometimes empathy is a lost trait, you know. The ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and feel their feelings and know what they're going through very early on in this. And you know, I'm a chalk and talk guy. I drove forklift and I worked in a sawmill for 12 years. I'm not a touchy feely guy. And for some reason, very early on, I was more of a psychologist and therapist than I was a lawyer educating people. I was blown away by the amount of DMs and then ultimately subsequent phone calls that I was getting to talk to people that were breaking down, you know, people that were losing their homes, going through divorce. One guy, the stories, you know, and this was very early on. I was in Lowe's parking lot. I was getting ready to go into Lowe's, and someone had asked if they could talk to me. And I ended up being on the phone with them for 2 hours, not even talking about MMTLP and legal issues. Just, they needed somebody to talk to. And I think Richard and I recognized very early on that this was going to be a very sensitive issue for people, and we really needed to be empathetic.
100%. Emotional intelligence is incredibly underrated. It's incredibly underrated in any part of life. And that's something that, you know, it's interesting you guys hearing talk about that, because I can draw so many parallels to that in my own career. And I think it's universal, is, you know, outside of very limited roles in society where you don't interface with another person under any circumstance, even programmers and coders have to talk to somebody to figure out what to do next, you know? So in basically every situation, it's so valuable to always keep that in mind, that you're always talking to another person that has emotions and they have needs and wants, and they are another person just like you and I. When you think about when you are not working or not doing something that you're passionate about, and you're going through a range of emotions and you're experiencing life, how it's coming at you, that other person you're talking to experiences the same exact thing all the time. And when that empathy, like you said, Brian, it's so incredibly important, and it's so helpful in creating a bridge between people. Because what's the biggest thing that does? It creates trust. You know, what's the number one step you need before you get anything done? Trust. Trust. It's all about trust.
So I told you I was going to hold you, and I appreciate your time, by the way. You didn't have to stay. You didn't have to stay this long. So we have 6 minutes, because I'm at 90 minutes is kind of like, that's about it, what we're good for.
That's my hard stop anyway.
We both need a nap anyway afterwards. So to non-Tesla people, there was an event. I happened to see it. I happened to be whatever. I happened to watch it. Elon Musk was test driving a Tesla, an S Model S, using the new version 12 FSD, and kind of to describe that version, it works by training. So there's something called neural nets. They are trained to learn how to go around a curve. And basically what they do is they're shown, and Farzad, you can correct me at any point I'm wrong, and they're shown literally probably hundreds and thousands of videos exemplifying what's happening. And through the computer power, you're able to train it. And that's as opposed to LiDAR, which is kind of a radar-based system, which kind of looks for objects and reacts to objects. And the problem kind of, or at least my understanding of the problem with that system is you ultimately have to map the Earth, and you have to map all the objects for it to work to the level you want it to work. Anyway, so Elon was driving around a 45-minute drive up in Palo Alto, and I think he picked at random places to go. And I think he had one minor intervention during this entire drive, and it was really fabulous. Really was. Yeah. It really was, because it really showed the future. Because whether it's Tesla or somebody else, we're not far off from having really full self-driving, where I always thought it's I'm in the back seat and the car's going. That's kind of how it goes. But I wanted to kind of like hear your feedback on that.
Yeah. So no, I think you did a really good job explaining that. I will add another layer to this, which is I think this is the part that is really defining the next step that we're taking as a civilization into the future. And that is the simple fact where, and I'll try to sort of make it into a way so that it's digestible for the audience. So right now, if it's Tesla, Cruise, any of these other LiDAR companies, whatever you want to call them, before this version that Elon Musk showed on Friday, a lot of the code, so the code that was written for the cars to behave in the world is written by humans. So there's literally somebody in a room with a team of 1,000 other people that are writing code that says, if it's LiDAR or camera, it doesn't matter. It says, if stop sign, then stop. If red light, then stop. If need to make left turn, then getting left turn, and then get to the line and then make a left, right? And there's advanced, this is like a very simplified version of it, but there's advanced ways of doing this, but it required a human to sit down and write all this out. The huge game-changing piece that happened on Friday that was disclosed is that Tesla has moved away from a human writing that code to taking video feed from the cars, from the 4 million cars that are driving around, taking the video feed around the car, then they dump this video feed into an AI that they've built with their own chips, and they're buying NVIDIA chips to also make that brain faster and smarter. So all they do is they take the video, they dump it into the system, and they give it video of cars that drive good. Like, here's how a car stops. Here's how a car goes through a green light. Here's how a car makes a right turn. Here's how a car, negotiates at roundabouts. And then the AI, this is even crazier. I'll have to add another step after this. And then what the AI does, it says, okay, thank you so much for giving me incredible footage of what it looks like to be a good driver. Here is the code that the car is going to use to operate in this world. And then it gives it the code. And then the code gets put into the car, and then the car drives. So like literally all the human has to do is to just give it the video. And the AI creates the code for the car. And here's what's even crazier. You don't even have to tell the AI what a stop sign is. You don't have to tell the AI what a green light is. You don't have to tell the AI what a roundabout is. All you have to give it are situations where a car is doing the right thing through those scenarios. So you just got to give it 1,000 hours of cars stopping at a stop sign. And the AI will figure out that, okay, every time this thing is approaching this this red octagonal sign that says stop, I'm noticing that it's stopping. And so I'm going to create code for that car that does that thing when that scenario happens. And now that's how they're writing code for the cars. So what does this mean? All Tesla has to do now is just take a ton of video, dump it into the AI, and the AI just gets better at driving. So like we've literally come to a point where it's an artificial intelligence that's driving the car. It is not human made. It's made by artificial intelligence.
Yeah, what I found is cool, the idea is that, let's say you're driving in a roundabout in West Los Angeles, and now you're in Barcelona driving a roundabout. It still recognizes it as a roundabout, and it would drive it as a roundabout. And you've never had to be at that other location. And again, I think the greater issue is you don't have to map. You don't have to do all that mapping. That's going to take forever. That and as an obstacle. There are systems that do self-driving, but they're usually geo-fenced. In other words, they can only do it within a very limited geography because that's all they've been set up to do. So you might see them and you wonder why, you wonder what Tesla is doing, because Tesla is doing it to make it available to drive the entire world, not just in a 2-block area in Phoenix, something like that. Yeah,
that's correct. And the only way, and now all Tesla, and this is where I think it's their ability to get to the point where they can have self-driving everywhere is insanely underestimated, is that all they have to do is get more chips and add more video. There's no other breakthrough they need. They've reached their breakthrough they needed. Now it's all dump the video into a computer that can process the data fast enough. That's it.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. And I know they spent like $2 billion on NVIDIA equipment this past year, and they're going to spend a boatload beyond. More. Yeah, because they have a new hardware system that's coming in. They have to train that. That requires a lot of specific training for that. But to me, like Friday night, for people that are following Tesla, that was a major giant. Giant. So it's interesting. I was going to respond before I let Farzad go and JR go. There was a question about somebody had an issue about AMC or whatever. So if you're in a legal issue, and this is not legal advice, of course, but if your legal issue is involving security, so you're looking for a securities lawyer. And if you live in a major city, I don't know, outside the United States, but you can call up, most cities have a bar association and a local bar association. And if you call up the local bar association, you ask them for a referral for a particular attorney, they usually can give you something. And alternatively to that, if you have friends, just like doctor, in finding a doctor, usually the best way of finding somebody you trust is having a friend who's had a good experience with somebody, and you use that to kind of base your choice. So that's what I would suggest. And again, if you feel uncomfortable when you meet with any lawyer, move on. There's no reason to stay. Anyway, I appreciate Farzad for spending time with us here tonight. Yes. I really appreciate your input. I urge everybody out there to check out Farzad's YouTube channel. Is also his Twitter handle, I think, is at Farziness.
You got it.
Is that correct? Yes, Farzyness.
Nailed it.
Yeah. And it's really
better than my name.
Yeah, I know. Eventually I'll get your name. And there's a lot.
Super nice meeting you, Farzad.
Likewise, man.
And he has on his channel, he has a lot of really interesting guests. And by the way, Farzad is this is, I think, his number one skill. He is an amazing interviewer. He really has a talent for that. So check him out. Thank you for joining us tonight. For everybody out there, have a great week. Be well. Take care of yourself, and have a great night.
Bye, everybody.
Talk to you soon.